They came without a warning. No rumbling skies, no glowing lights, no diplomatic nonsense. Just ships the size of cities darkening the clouds, blocking out the sun, dropping straight into our world like they owned it. They were called the Creari, an ancient species, built like monsters and bred for one thing: conquest through carnage. By the time the first wave hit, half of Earth was already in flames. Cities fell in hours. Tokyo vanished in less than 10 minutes. They didn't come to enslave or negotiate. They came to feed. We weren't even worth words to them. They called us soft meat in their broadcasts. Primitive, overpopulated, emotionally unstable. Their ships hovered above the capitals, raining fire while the Creari soldiers, massive creatures with plated skin, too many limbs, and eyes that pulsed with hunger, descended to the surface. They didn't wear armor. They didn't need to. Their biology made bullets bounce. They didn't use tactics. They just rushed and tore. And when we screamed, they laughed. Literally laughed. Their comms were filled with it. The first 2 days were hell. Governments fell quiet. Internet blackout. The sky was thick with smoke, and whatever was left of the militaries fought losing battles in broken streets. The Creari didn't even see it as a war. It was dinner. But that's the thing about humans. We're not like other species. Sure, we cry, and we break, and we bleed too easy, but we don't stay down. Somewhere in the Appalachian Mountains, a group of survivors gathered. Ex-soldiers, farmers, hackers, kids, people who had no business standing against the galaxy's apex predators. But they did. They were led by a woman named Sergeant Lena Voss, dishonorably discharged for disobeying a direct order during the South China Rebellion. She didn't talk much. But her eyes? They burned. "Don't wait for the governments," she said. "They're gone. Don't pray for help. We are the help. The only thing we've got left is each other, and the rage in our bones." They called themselves the Ashborn because they came from the ashes. Their first weapon wasn't a gun or a missile. It was information. See, the Creari weren't expecting resistance, and they definitely weren't expecting human hackers to crack their localized drone signals. Within days, Lena's team found out something crucial. The Creari had weak points, not many, but enough. Behind their armored chests was a small organ, like a regulator. Shoot it, and the whole beast dropped. They also depended heavily on ultrasonic resonance for internal communication, which could be scrambled. That was when humans began fighting dirty. We stopped trying to match them in strength. We started using our brains, our unpredictability, our madness. Cities became traps. Underground tunnels turned into corridors of death. Humans lured Creari into ambushes with bait, sometimes food, sometimes bodies. Explosives rigged with old-school tech, pressure plates, tripwires, boiling oil, things the Creari scanners couldn't pick up. They weren't just fighting soldiers anymore. They were fighting a species with nothing to lose. Word spread. Resistance cells formed all over the planet. London sewers, African deserts, frozen wastes in Canada. Some scientists in Norway even rigged a way to hijack one of the Creari drones and use it to pilot a stolen ship, kamikaze style, into a Creari mothership above Moscow. They died, but they took the ship with them. It wasn't victory, not yet. But it was the first time the Creari screamed. First time their broadcasts didn't mock us. They roared with confusion. Soft meat was fighting back, bleeding and burned, starving and half mad, but fighting back. And Lena? She didn't smile. Not once, even when her squad took down their first Creari war beast with just 5 people and a modified sewer pipe full of explosives. "We're not fighting for Earth," she said, kneeling in blood and ash. "We're fighting because no one tells humans what they're worth. Not anymore." The galaxy didn't know what kind of species we were, but they were about to find out. The Ashborn didn't sleep much. Sleep meant slowing down, and slowing down meant getting caught. The Creari didn't hunt like animals. They hunted like nightmares. Silent, fast, and merciless. They'd sniff out heat, sound, even electromagnetic pulses. The moment you got comfortable, they were already behind you. So Lena Voss made sure her people stayed uncomfortable. They moved constantly, set traps, changed frequencies, lived in shadows. In the early days, they operated mostly at night, using the darkness as cover. But soon they learned Creari could see heat signatures through most materials. That's when they adapted again, smearing themselves in cold mud, masking their heat with chemical paste, hiding in old meat lockers, sewers, morgues. The Ashborn weren't human anymore. Not really. They were feral. And it worked. In a bombed-out section of Philadelphia, they brought down an entire platoon of Creari soldiers using reprogrammed subway trains filled with scrap explosives. They called it the Silver Guillotine. The Creari had laughed, until steel shredded their armor and burned their insides. Lena watched from a rooftop as the wreckage smoked, her face painted in soot and blood, arms crossed. "We don't win by killing them," she told the others. "We win by making them fear us." And that fear, it started to spread. Back in orbit, aboard one of the Creari command ships, General Hrothgar was furious. The humans were supposed to be livestock. Their biological data said they were emotionally unstable, disorganized, prone to infighting. They weren't warriors. And yet, here was Earth. Weeks into the invasion, and the Creari had lost 3 minor fleet ships, 22 transports, and over 1,000 ground units, because humans were irrational, because humans didn't follow patterns, because humans refused to die quietly. Worse, Earth's biosphere was starting to infect them, literally. The bacteria in the air, harmless to humans, began to cause skin irritations and hallucinations in Creari units. General Hrothgar ordered cleansing drones to burn infected zones with plasma, but it only scattered the resistance deeper underground. It was psychological now. The Creari soldiers, bred to dominate, began showing signs of stress. Some refused to deploy without air filters. Others claimed they heard human voices even when alone. The humans began broadcasting messages over Creari channels, twisted, whispery things in broken alien dialects. "You came for meat. Now choke on the bones. Every shadow has a knife. We were born in fire. You're just the fuel." The broadcasts weren't tactical. They were personal. They were meant to unnerve. And they did. By month 2, the Creari were no longer advancing. They were holding defensive positions, fortifications. They didn't say it out loud, but they were afraid of a species they had dismissed as food. That's when Lena knew the tide was turning. In a hidden bunker beneath what used to be Baltimore, Lena met with other cell leaders via hijacked drone signals. There were maybe a dozen faces on the screen. Dirty, scarred, exhausted, but alive and angry. "We've cracked their speech patterns," said Dr. Malik, a linguist from the old UN Council. "We can start jamming their orders, maybe even fake a few commands of our own." A grizzled woman from South Africa chimed in next. "We're training wolves to carry explosives. The Creari can't detect them. They don't register Earth animals as threats." Then came Saito, an ex-construction worker from Japan. "My crew found a way to melt through Creari armor using battery acid and magnetron waves. It ain't pretty, but it works." Lena nodded at each one, her eyes cold and unreadable. She didn't care where they came from. Doctors, killers, teachers, thieves. Earth had only one job now: survive by becoming something the universe never expected. United. Cruel. Relentless. Later that night, as the Ashborn huddled in the dark, a boy named Nico, maybe 14, eyes too old for his face, asked Lena a question. Do you think they'll leave? Lena didn't answer right away. Instead, she knelt beside the fireless stove, checked her rifle, and said, "They won't leave, kid." Nico looked crushed. "So we're all gonna die?" She glanced up at him, a flicker of heat in her voice. "No," she said. "They are." And far above the smoke-choked Earth, the Creari began transmitting a new warning to their fleets across the stars. Earth is not soft meat. Earth is not prey. Earth is infected. Earth is hostile. By week 9, Earth had stopped being a battlefield. It had become a trap, one the Creari couldn't crawl out of. Their elite squadrons, once thought invincible, were now ghosts, burned, broken, or lost deep in the ruins of human cities. Those same cities, once symbols of civilization, were now war nests, twisted steel jungles with sniper holes, tripwire forests, and death blooming in every shadow. The Creari began calling the cities red zones, refusing to enter without full detachments. Even then, most didn't come back. In New York, what was left of it, the Ashborn had turned Times Square into a slaughterhouse. Rigged billboards blared white noise that scrambled Creari comms. Sewer tunnels carried smoke and toxin clouds up through the storm drains. They used hacked speakers to replay battle sounds from days ago, confusing the enemy into firing at ghosts. And then there were the screams. Ashborn operatives recorded actual Creari death howls and looped them across the ruins. Nothing was more unnerving than hearing your own kind dying on repeat, especially when you didn't know if it was real or a trick. Some Creari squads panicked. They shot each other, fled. The predators were beginning to feel like prey. Inside an abandoned subway terminal beneath the Bronx, Lena Voss sat over a large map carved into steel. Pins marked every known Creari nest. Green meant cleared, red meant active, and black meant human blood. "We're not just pushing back anymore," she said to the others in the war room. "We're going hunting." Saito grinned like a wolf. "About time." They called the operation Black Lung. The plan was to breach a major Creari stronghold in Detroit, where one of the mothership landing claws had burrowed into the crust. It wasn't just a command post. It was a hive. They bred their spawn there, stored their meat, kept prisoners. And Lena wanted it burned to hell. But it wasn't about revenge, not really. It was about sending a message. The Ashborn moved silently through miles of collapsed tunnel. They wore Creari armor torn from the dead, filthy, cracked, and stitched with wire to fit human bodies. They called it second skin. Some even wore Creari teeth as trophies, braided into their hair or hung around their necks. When they finally reached the hive perimeter, they found something unexpected. The Creari weren't growing. They were dying. Whatever Earth's bacteria had started, it had mutated. Their hive was half-rotted, walls slimy with black mold. The air was thick with spores. Creari corpses lined the tunnels, many of them discolored, their bones brittle and splitting from within. Dr. Malik, observing through drone cam, whispered into comms. "It's not just resistance. It's an ecosystem failure. Earth's biosphere is incompatible." Lena stared at the decay, her voice flat. "We're poison to them." They didn't hesitate. The Ashborn moved in, flamethrowers, acid bombs, concussion charges. They didn't just kill, they desecrated. They made sure every Creari spawn pod was smashed, every communication node melted. They turned the hive into a funeral pyre, and when the screams came, they let them echo. Above Earth, General Hroth-Kar watched the feeds in silence. The footage from Detroit was being broadcast back to the Creari High Conclave. Elders who had never seen war up close now stared at burning spawn sacks and mutilated soldiers. Earth wasn't worth the harvest anymore. It was a war zone too costly to win. A Creari strategist finally spoke. Request permission to initiate orbital purge. Hrothgar's jaw twitched. Denied. Why? These creatures defile us. Because if we burn their world, he growled, they will follow the fire back to ours. There was a pause. Cold. Dreadful. He was right. Humans weren't interested in surviving anymore. They wanted retribution. And then, as if summoned by that very thought, a rogue human transmission broke into their fleet-wide comms. It was Lena Voss. Blood on her face, smoke in her hair. Behind her, the hive burned red. She spoke one sentence. Predators don't get to choose their last meal. Then the feed cut. The Creari, for the first time in their recorded history, began evacuating a planet. The first Creari ship to retreat exploded before it left orbit. No one claimed responsibility. No one had to. All over Earth, resistance cells had been watching the skies. They'd mapped the enemy's takeoff sequences, their orbital paths, their exhaust frequencies. And when the Creari tried to run, Earth answered with fire. It wasn't fancy tech. It wasn't space-age missiles or laser cannons. It was salvaged parts, hacked alien cores, and sheer human spite. Old Russian ICBMs retrofitted with reverse-engineered plasma heads. Some of them detonated before they even reached their targets. But the ones that landed? They sent messages. Across the globe, humans watched the sky light up, not in fear, but in pride. Not hope, rage, a different kind of fuel. Lena Voss stood on the roof of a shattered cathedral in what used to be Montreal, eyes locked on the flaming debris streaking across the clouds. "That's one," she said. Beside her, Nico held a battered radio. "There's another 2 confirmed breakoffs over the Indian Ocean." Saito's voice crackled in on a separate line from Eastern Europe. "One of the carriers is leaking fuel. We clipped it. That bastard's not making it far." Lena didn't smile. She never did. But her voice turned colder, heavier. They thought they were feeding. They didn't know they were bleeding. Something strange was happening now. Something even the Ashborn hadn't planned. The Creari were turning on each other. In the upper atmosphere, their fleet was divided between 2 commands. Those who wanted to cut losses and flee, and those who demanded vengeance, calling the withdrawal a coward's death. Creari blood feuds were brutal, tribal, and sacred. Honor ran thicker than strategy. And when word of human retaliation reached the outer colonies, shame followed. Generals who had spoken of Earth as livestock were now being questioned, challenged. On Earth, we didn't know the full politics behind their cracks, but we saw the result. They stalled. Some ships hovered mid-evac, vulnerable and blind, caught between pride and fear. Others descended again, attempting to reassert control, but the fire waiting for them was hotter than before. Ashborn commanders around the globe launched counterstrikes. Drones painted with graffiti and war paint dove straight into hulls. Crude airships filled with explosives and magnetized shards sliced through open landing bays. In Cairo, a group of teenage engineers hacked into a downed Creari scout and piloted it straight into a mothership's underbelly while blasting Beethoven's Ode to Joy. It wasn't just battle anymore. It was theater. A blood opera performed by a species that had nothing left to lose and every reason to destroy. And Lena? She was preparing for the final act. She stood in an old steel mill outside Chicago, now a forward base for a weapon she'd only whispered about until now, Operation Wormwood. At its core was a Creari hypercore, scavenged from a disabled war cruiser, unstable and radioactive as hell. Human scientists told her it couldn't be used, said it would blow the planet before it helped save it. Lena just stared and said, "Then don't miss." They weren't going to use it on Earth. They were going to send it back. The Ashborn had found a way, barely, Using scavenged parts from Creari comms relays and navigational AI, they began to configure a long-range transport built from a crashed landing craft. It was crude, ugly, barely held together, but it had coordinates to the Creari homeworld. The plan was suicidal. Everyone knew it. Even if the bomb made it, the chances of surviving the launch were close to zero. But the Ashborn didn't flinch. Saito volunteered to fly it. No hesitation. "If I die," he said, "make sure they choke on my bones." Lena just nodded, then gave him her dog tags. "Make it count." That night, the sky lit up again, this time with something no Creari had ever seen. A human-made weapon, stitched together with rage and rust, piercing the void like a spear hurled by the gods themselves. Aboard his makeshift craft, Saito looked down at the earth one last time, not as a soldier, not even as a man, but as a warning. And then he was gone. Somewhere in the void, between the stars that had watched the Creari rise for eons, a human-made coffin hurtled through space, wrapped in vengeance and noise. Saito was strapped in tight, every inch of his body rattling against metal that was never meant to fly again. The ship stank of burned wires and old blood, half machine, half memory. Panels flickered. Warnings screamed in half-translated Creari script. The hypercore throbbed behind him like a diseased heart, ticking down its unstable pulses. He grinned through the pain. They thought we were afraid of dying. He didn't know if anyone heard him. Maybe Lena, maybe no one. But he spoke anyway, for the record, for the ghosts. "I'm not here to live," he whispered. "I'm here to leave a scar." Back on Earth, the Ashborn monitored the signal. They tracked the vessel's warped path, watched it vanish into the dark at the edge of their hacked star maps. The moment it crossed the last beacon, the room went silent. Not a word. Just Lena standing there with her fists clenched, jaw tight. Dr. Malik finally broke the silence. "If it hits, we won't see it." "Good," Lena said. "Let them scream alone." But they did see it. Not with their eyes, not right away, but with the Creari. The reaction was instant, electric. Across every fleet still hovering in Earth's orbit, their ships suddenly pulled back. Orders reversed. Trajectories changed. Whatever fractured alliance they'd held was broken now. They knew where Saito was headed. They were too late to stop it. And then, 10 days later, it happened. It wasn't a boom. It wasn't even fire. Not at first. It was absence. A sudden silence across the Creari galactic net. Their homeworld, coordinates once bristling with traffic, military reports, status updates, went dark. Total blackout. The Creari didn't tell anyone what had happened. They couldn't. Whatever that hypercore did to their world, it wasn't just destruction. It was shame. Cosmic, historical shame. Earth watched as entire squadrons of Creari ships dropped from orbit. No resistance, no fight. Some crashed into oceans, others just floated until they broke apart. Others self-terminated. They couldn't go home anymore, and they couldn't stay here. It was over. But humans weren't finished yet. In the weeks that followed, Earth's surface slowly began to open up. Ashborn cells gathered in the ruins to rebuild. But it wasn't a celebration. It was a reckoning. Billions were still dead. Oceans poisoned. Forests turned to ash. There were no governments left, only councils. No presidents or kings, just survivors. And Lena? She disappeared. One night she walked out into the hills above what used to be Cleveland. Nico saw her go. She didn't say a word. Didn't leave a note. She just took a rifle, some rations, and vanished into the smoke. Some say she died out there. Others say she's still moving through the shadows, watching, waiting, preparing for whatever the galaxy throws next. Because in the end, Lena didn't fight for medals or revenge. She fought to remind the stars of one thing. Humanity was not prey. We were the infection, the fire, the species that should have died quietly, but instead taught the universe how loud rage can be. And the Creari, the deadliest predators in the known galaxy, they would spend the rest of their history whispering the name of the world that killed their pride. Earth. The skies were quiet now. For the first time in months, there were no roars of Creari engines, no plasma streaks through clouds, no death falling from above. Just wind. Cold, cracked wind blowing through the ruins of what used to be cities. Nature was trying to remember itself. Trees burned black but still rooted. Rivers choked with ash but flowing again. Earth, like its people, refused to die. But peace? This wasn't peace. This was after. The war had ended without a treaty, without surrender. The Creari vanished into the stars, broken and humiliated, their homeworld silent, possibly dead. But Earth hadn't won. Not really. It had survived. And that survival came with a price no one had counted. Entire continents were ghost zones. Communication was patchy, and food supplies were a constant fight. The ash in the air still poisoned lungs. Bodies remained buried under rubble in places too dangerous to reach. And worse, humans had changed. Permanently. The Ashborn, now scattered across the planet, were more than fighters. They were symbols. Some saw them as saviors. Others feared them. What did it mean to follow people who had taught the world how to kill monsters using bone knives and dirty bombs? In New Santiago, a makeshift settlement rising in the Andes, a council gathered under a cracked dome, salvaged from an old observatory. Men and women from every surviving region sat at a stone table, most wearing mismatched armor, faces hard and sunburned. "We need order," one said. "We need structure, agriculture, power grids." "We need to bury the dead," another snapped. "You want to talk about grids? People are turning feral out there, bandits with acid rifles and Creari teeth on chains. No government survived. That means we make one, or we'll rot in the mud we bled for." That's when a figure stepped into the chamber. The room fell silent. Nico. He wasn't a boy anymore. Months in the fire had aged him, face lean, jaw set, eyes like chipped glass. He walked with a limp now, carrying Lena's old rifle slung across his back. "She didn't want this," he said. They turned to him. "Who?" "Lena, the Ashborn. We didn't fight so we could go back to kings and flags and lines on maps. We fought because no one else would. We survived because we had to. Not to crown ourselves, not to rule." A silence hung there, thick and unsettled. Then someone spoke, a former naval officer. "And what do you propose? Chaos?" Nico stared him down. "I propose that before we start trying to rebuild the world, we figure out what we want it to be. Because the last version of Earth, the one they invaded, that world invited monsters." Outside the dome, people gathered. Survivors, fighters, children born in bunkers, engineers patching together wind turbines, doctors using salt water to clean wounds. No armies, no borders, just broken people refusing to lie down. The Ashborn weren't leaders. They were reminders of how far humanity could fall and still keep crawling forward. And yet, not everything stayed quiet. In the farthest reaches of the solar system, a deep space telescope flickered back to life, patched by scavenger crews rebuilding it for scientific use. One of the techs saw it first. A strange anomaly, not a fleet, not a star, a signal, faint, encrypted, not Creari. It pulsed like a heartbeat, steady, intentional. From somewhere deep beyond the Orion Drift, a message came. "We saw your war. We saw your fire. We didn't think you would win. We were wrong. We are coming." The techs didn't sleep that night. They brought it to the council in New Santiago, and Nico stood alone at the edge of the transmission feed, watching those words repeat over and over like an omen. "Is it them?" someone asked. He shook his head slowly. "Number, this isn't the Creari. This feels colder." They were not alone, and Earth had just announced itself as a threat. The galaxy had been watching, and now the rest were on their way. The signal didn't stop. Every 6 hours, the same sequence pulsed across frequencies only deep-range scanners could catch. No image, no voice, just those words over and over. "We are coming." Earth's surface hadn't even finished burying its dead, but now eyes turned skyward again. Not in terror, not yet, but in grim readiness. Humanity had just learned how to crawl through hell. They weren't about to be caught off guard again. In the underground facility once known as Vault Theta, buried deep beneath the Scottish Highlands, the Ashborn began preparing for the second storm. They didn't rebuild cities. They built bunkers, training camps, weapons labs. Earth wasn't trying to become a civilization again. It was becoming a fortress. Nico spent his days walking the old relay corridors of Vault Theta, reading the data, scanning the frequencies. He was restless, haunted. Not by what had happened, but by what hadn't, by the silence between the signals. He'd learned from Lena that threats don't always come with roars. Sometimes they come politely, quietly, predictably, and that's what scared him the most. "We need eyes past the belt," he told the new Earth Council. "If something's out there, we don't wait for it to knock." He wasn't a soldier anymore. He was something harder to define. A survivor. A symbol. And symbols, as the Creari had learned, had power. The Council, fractured and struggling, didn't argue. They gave Nico access to what remained of Earth's orbital defense network. With old satellites patched using Creari tech, he launched Project Sentinel, a net of observation drones, scanning the void for movement. They were crude, dirty, and beautiful. Human. Days passed, then weeks. The signal changed, not in message, but in tone. It began adding layers, hidden frequencies, mathematical pulses. Dr. Malik, now one of Earth's lead xenocryptologists, unraveled it slowly, painfully. And what he found wasn't a threat. It was a challenge, not "we are coming" in a hostile tone. "But we saw what you did, and now we want to see if it was a fluke." "They're testing us," Malik said to the War Council. "Someone out there watched the Creari fall, and instead of fearing us, they got curious." Nico leaned over the console, eyes narrowing. "What kind of species watches another get gutted and thinks, 'Let's see what made that happen'?" Malik didn't answer, because deep down, everyone knew the truth. Something worse than the Creari was out there. Something smarter. Something older. And now that Earth had roared loud enough to shake the stars, it had drawn attention. So Earth did what Earth had always done. It adapted. Ashborn recruiters traveled the ruins, searching for anyone with skills, knowledge, or the will to fight again. Former scavengers were given rifles. Scientists were pulled from bunkers and thrown into labs with whatever scraps could be salvaged. And children, those born during the occupation, were taught the truth early. You are not safe. The universe doesn't care if you've suffered. No one is coming to save you. You fight, or you die. In old Brazil, a scavenger tribe constructed a sky harpoon from shipwrecked alien alloys, capable of anchoring enemy vessels during descent. In Morocco, engineers built signal jammers out of fused Creari language cores, able to scramble even deep space navigation systems. In the Arctic, remnants of the Russian Federation activated something darker, an experimental AI buried long ago under layers of frost and concrete. It was called Volchok, the wolf. Cold, ruthless, unbound by ethics. It had been designed for global suppression, never deployed during the old wars. But now? Now they gave it a new mission. Protect Earth, at all costs. And in the quiet spaces between stars, something was coming. Not fleets, not yet, but scouts. Nico stood in Vault Theta's observatory chamber, watching a small red dot appear on the edge of the system. No ID, no propulsion matching Creari tech, no broadcast, just movement. Deliberate. Slow. He whispered to himself, let them come. Because Earth wasn't rebuilding peace, it was preparing a welcome. It appeared in Earth's skies on a quiet morning. No explosions, no invasion alarms, no shadow creeping across continents. Just a single vessel, sleek, bone-white, and shaped like a blade, hovering above the Pacific, perfectly still, as if it had been there the whole time. No insignia, no markings, no demands. It didn't move, didn't speak. It just watched. From Vault Theta, Nico stared at the live feed. Dozens of telescopes and drone cameras tracked every inch of the craft, but it refused to yield anything. No heat signatures, no emissions. It defied physics like it didn't belong in this universe. And maybe it didn't. Dr. Malik muttered under his breath. This thing didn't travel here. It arrived, like thought, like memory. The council was divided. Some argued to contact it. Others wanted it shot down immediately. But Earth had learned its lesson. Never assume the enemy is here to talk. And that's when it happened. A signal. Not on radio. Not infrared. Not even through the known electromagnetic spectrum. It spoke through thought. Hundreds of humans, soldiers, farmers, scavengers, children, fell unconscious at once. Not in pain, but as if pulled into a dream, a shared vision. And when they woke, they remembered everything. A voice, clear, cold, curious. You are not prey, you are not predator, you are mutation, you are error. An anomaly that defies expectation. We watched you kill the Creari. Now we ask, what else can you kill? It wasn't a threat. It wasn't even fear. It was fascination. The species behind the blade ship didn't want Earth's resources. They didn't want slaves. They wanted data. They saw humanity not as vermin or rivals, but as something far worse. A variable they couldn't predict. And in a galaxy built on cold equations and conquest, unpredictability was dangerous. The next part of the signal was even clearer. We offer a proposition. Face us in trial. A test of your existence. Win and remain. Fail and be forgotten. Nico heard it in his mind, like it had been etched there since birth. He turned to the council, jaw locked. They want a war. Malik nodded slowly. Not a war of territory, of worth. They're measuring us like a lab rat solving a maze. Only the maze is survival. The vote was brief. Humanity didn't bow. Not now, not ever. A new force was assembled. Not soldiers, not diplomats. But the most unstable, most adaptive, most dangerous minds Earth had left. They called them the Second Ashborn. Veterans of the Creari War. Children born in fire. Hackers who weaponized thought. Scavengers who built bombs from alien waste. And leading them was Nico. Older now, scarred and silent, carrying not just Lena's rifle, but her cause. He didn't fight for Earth's past. He fought for its future, the twisted, terrifying shape it had to take to survive a universe that wanted it gone. The trial began in orbit. A platform the size of a city, black as the void, materialized near the moon. Gravity bent wrong around it. Lights bled in colors the human eye couldn't describe. The Ashborn stepped onto it, eyes forward. And the test? It wasn't fair. They faced beasts crafted from theoretical biology, weapons coded in time loops, puzzles built on collapsing logic. One chamber flooded their senses with memories of the war, the screams, the burning, the hopelessness, trying to drown them in despair. But they didn't break, because Earth didn't raise heroes. It raised monsters with purpose. Nico, limping, bleeding, half-mad with pain, stood before the final judge, a being of pure mind, floating in a shell of glass and light. It asked him one final question. "Why do you persist?" And Nico, voice shaking but steady, answered, "Because someone has to show the stars what happens when you try to erase the wrong species." He pulled the trigger. The chamber shattered, and Earth's trial was over. They passed. The blade ship vanished days later. No reward, no allies, just silence. But humanity didn't care. They returned home, changed, hardened, wiser, not just survivors anymore, not even just soldiers, but a cosmic warning. Because the galaxy now understood one thing: burn into every species' memory, carved into the bones of fallen empires. Earth is not prey. Earth is not safe. Earth is the reason monsters check behind their backs.